Chapter 1. The Urban Legend. It started as a whisper. A rumor passed around at school, at local bars, and around campfires. A 200-year-old hospital, abandoned and decaying on the outskirts of town, was said to harbor secrets and horrors beyond imagination. Once a beacon of medical advancement, St. Mercy Hospital had become a hushed topic, a tale of ghostly apparitions and inexplicable phenomena. St. Mercy is cursed, the older folks would say, their eyes clouding with unspoken memories. No one comes out the same. My name is Emma, and I had always been fascinated by the supernatural. Along with my friends, Jake and Lisa, we decided to unravel the mystery. We were all senior students at the local university, studying history and paranormal studies. This investigation would be our final project, a blend of curiosity and academic ambition. It all began with an old journal we found in the library's restricted section. The journal belonged to Dr. Evelyn Mercer, a renowned physician who had worked at St. Mercy in the early 1900s. Her last entries were frantic, filled with cryptic warnings and desperate pleas for help. She wrote of patients disappearing, of strange figures lurking in the shadows, and of a darkness that seemed to seep from the very walls of the hospital. The journal piqued our interest, and we spent weeks researching the history of St. Mercy. The hospital had been founded in 1823 by a philanthropist named Samuel Whitmore. It was initially a place of hope and healing, but over the years, it had become infamous for its experimental treatments and high mortality rates. By the mid-1900s, it was shut down after a series of gruesome and unexplained deaths. "There's something they're not telling us," Lisa said one evening, her eyes wide with excitement. Something they wanted to keep hidden, and so we decided to uncover the truth. We gathered all the equipment we would need for a night at St. Mercy: cameras, voice recorders, flashlights, and enough snacks to last us through the night. We were ready to face whatever lurked in the shadows of that old hospital. Chapter 2. The Plan. It was a crisp autumn evening when we gathered at my apartment, our makeshift headquarters. The walls were adorned with maps, old photographs, and newspaper clippings about St. Mercy Hospital. "So, what's the plan?" Jake asked, his voice a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "We need to document everything," I replied, pulling out a detailed map of the hospital's layout. "We'll go in tomorrow night, set up cameras in key locations, and record our findings. Lisa, you handle the EVP recorder and thermal camera. Jake, you take the EMF meter and the night vision camera." Lisa nodded, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. "What about you, Emma?" "I'll take the main camera and a handheld recorder. I'll also be in charge of documenting our findings in the journal. We need to make sure we cover every inch of that place." As we pored over the maps and planned our route, the reality of what we were about to do began to sink in. St. Mercy was no ordinary haunted house. It was a place with a dark history, where countless lives had been lost and countless horrors had occurred. But we were determined to uncover the truth, no matter what. The next day, we prepared our gear and set off for the hospital. It was a gloomy, overcast day, with a chill in the air that seemed to seep into our bones. As we approached the hospital, its imposing structure loomed before us, its windows shattered and its walls covered in ivy. "Are we really doing this?" Jake asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Yes," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We have to." for history, for the truth. We made our way to the main entrance, which was boarded up with old rotting wood. Jake and Lisa pried the boards loose, while I kept watch, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, the last board came free, and we stepped into the dark, musty interior of the hospital. Chapter 3: Entering the Abyss. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of decay. The floors creaked beneath our feet, and the walls seemed to close in around us. We switched on our flashlights, their beams cutting through the darkness, revealing glimpses of long-forgotten corridors and rooms. "Let's stick together," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We don't want to get separated." We made our way through the main hall, our footsteps echoing in the silence. The hospital was eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak or drip of water. We passed by old examination rooms, their doors hanging off their hinges, and operating theaters that looked like scenes from a horror movie. "This place gives me the creeps," Lisa muttered, glancing around nervously. "Just stay close," Jake replied, his grip tightening on the EMF meter. We reached the central staircase, a grand sweeping structure that led to the upper floors. The steps were covered in a thick layer of dust, and the banister was cracked and splintered. We ascended cautiously, our flashlights revealing more of the hospital's decaying interior. On the second floor, we found what appeared to be the administrative offices. Old desks and chairs were scattered about, papers and files strewn across the floor. We set up our first camera here, aiming it towards the hallway where Dr. Mercer's office was located. "Let's see if we can find anything in her office," I suggested, leading the way. Dr. Mercer's office was a small, cramped room at the end of the hall. The door was ajar, and we pushed it open, revealing a space filled with old books, medical equipment, and personal belongings. The walls were lined with shelves, and a large wooden desk stood in the center of the room. "This must have been where she worked," Lisa said, picking up a dusty book from the shelf. "Look at this," Jake said, pointing to a photograph on the desk. It was a picture of Dr. Mercer, a stern-looking woman with piercing eyes. She stood beside a group of patients, all of whom looked gaunt and hollow-eyed. "She looks haunted," I murmured, studying the photograph. We spent some time exploring the office, examining the books and papers that Dr. Mercer had left behind. Most of it was medical records and research notes, but there were a few personal letters that hinted at the struggle she faced. "She mentioned something about the darkness," Lisa said, reading one of the letters, "and how it was spreading through the hospital." "Do you think she meant the deaths and disappearances?" Jake asked. "Maybe," I replied, "but it sounds like she was talking about something more sinister." As we continued our investigation, the atmosphere in the hospital seemed to grow heavier, as if the very air was pressing down on us. We decided to set up another camera in the hallway outside Dr. Mercer's office, hoping to capture any strange occurrences. Chapter 4: The First Encounter. We moved on to the third floor, where the patient wards were located. The long, narrow corridors were lined with doors, each leading to a small, sparsely furnished room. The beds were still there, their mattresses stained and torn, and the walls were covered in peeling paint. "This place is like a time capsule," Jake said, setting up the night vision camera. "Yeah, a time capsule of nightmares," Lisa replied, shivering. As we walked down the corridor, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every so often, I would catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow flitting across the wall, or a figure standing in a doorway. But whenever I turned to look, there was nothing there. "Did you see that?" Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. "See what?" Jake asked, glancing around nervously. "I thought I saw someone standing in that room," she said, pointing to a door halfway down the hall. We approached the door cautiously, our flashlights revealing an empty room. There was no sign of anyone, but the feeling of being watched persisted. "Maybe it's just our imaginations," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "Or maybe it's the ghosts of the patients," Jake muttered. We continued our exploration, setting up cameras and recording any strange sounds or movements. The EMF meter occasionally spiked, indicating a possible presence, but we couldn't be sure. It was late into the night when we decided to take a break and review the footage we had captured so far. We gathered in what used to be the nurse's station, a small cramped room with a few chairs and a table. As we watched the footage, our excitement turned to dread. The cameras had captured several instances of strange phenomena, doors opening and closing on their own, shadowy figures moving through the halls, and disembodied voices whispering in the darkness. "This is incredible," Jake said, his eyes wide with amazement, "but also terrifying." "What do you think it means?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think it means we're not alone," I replied, a chill running down my spine. Chapter 5. The basement. With a renewed determination, we decided to explore the basement, a place that had been mentioned frequently in Dr. Mercer's journal. According to her notes, it was in the basement that the most disturbing events had occurred, and where the hospital's darkest secrets were hidden. The entrance to the basement was a heavy iron door at the end of a narrow corridor. The door creaked loudly as we pushed it open, revealing a steep staircase leading down into the darkness. The air grew colder and more oppressive as we descended, and the faint smell of mildew and decay grew stronger. "Stay close," I whispered, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The basement was a labyrinth of rooms and corridors, filled with old medical equipment, storage boxes, and other forgotten remnants of the hospital's past. We set up cameras at key points, hoping to capture any paranormal activity. "This place is a maze," Lisa said, her voice echoing off the walls. "Yeah, and it feels like something's watching us," Jake added, his grip tightening on the EMF meter. We made our way to the morgue, a place that Dr. Mercer had mentioned repeatedly in her journal. The room was cold and sterile, with metal tables and rows of drawers lining the walls. The sense of unease was palpable, and the EMF meter began to spike wildly. "There's definitely something here," Jake said, his voice tense. As we set up our equipment, a loud bang echoed through the basement, followed by the sound of footsteps. We froze, our hearts pounding in our chests. "Did you hear that?" Lisa whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Yeah," I replied, my voice trembling. "Let's go check it out." We followed the sound, our flashlights illuminating the dark, narrow corridors. The footsteps seemed to lead us deeper into the basement, to a part of the hospital that was even more decayed and forgotten. We finally reached a large metal door, its surface covered in rust and grime. "This must be it," I said, my hand shaking, as I reached for the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a room filled with old medical records and equipment. In the center of the room was a large metal table, and on it lay a decaying, leather-bound book. "Is that..." Jake began, but his voice trailed off as we approached the table. The book was Dr. Mercer's journal, or rather, the continuation of the journal we had found in the library. It was filled with more frantic entries, detailing the horrors she had witnessed and the experiments that had been conducted in the hospital. "This is it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is what we've been looking for." As we read through the journal, the full extent of the hospital's dark history was revealed. Dr. Mercer wrote of patients being subjected to cruel and inhumane experiments, of strange rituals conducted in the basement, and of a malevolent force that seemed to feed off the suffering and fear. "We need to get out of here," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "This place is cursed." "Not yet," I replied, my determination overriding my fear. "We need to document everything. We need to show the world what happened here." Chapter 6: The Final Confrontation. As we continued our investigation, the paranormal activity seemed to intensify. The air grew colder, and the sense of being watched became almost unbearable. We captured more footage of shadowy figures, disembodied voices, and objects moving on their own. "This is insane," Jake said, his voice shaking. "We need to leave before something happens to us." "Just a little longer," I insisted, my curiosity and determination driving me forward. We're so close to the truth. We made our way to the operating theater, a large cold room with metal tables and bright overhead lights. The sense of dread was overwhelming, and the EMF meter was off the charts. "This is where it happened," I said, reading from Dr. Mercer's journal. "This is where they conducted the experiments." As we set up our equipment, a loud, blood-curdling scream echoed through the room, followed by the sound of footsteps running towards us. We turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Lisa and Jake and pulling them towards the exit. We raced through the hospital, the sound of footsteps and screams following us. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to close in around us. We finally burst through the main entrance, collapsing on the ground outside, gasping for breath. "We need to leave," Jake said, his voice trembling. "This place is evil." "Agreed," Lisa replied, her eyes wide with fear. We gathered our equipment and made our way back to my apartment, our hearts still pounding with fear. As we reviewed the footage, the full extent of what we had experienced became clear. The hospital was a place of unimaginable horror, a place where the suffering and fear of countless souls had created a malevolent force. "We need to share this," I said, my voice filled with determination. "We need to show the world what happened at St. Mercy." Chapter 7: Unveiling the Truth. The next few days were a blur of activity as we compiled our findings and prepared to share our story with the world. We edited the footage, wrote a detailed report, and created a website to showcase our findings. We reached out to local news outlets, paranormal investigators, and historians, hoping to shed light on the dark history of St. Mercy Hospital. Our story quickly gained traction, and soon, people from all over the world were reaching out to us, sharing their own experiences and offering their support. The hospital became a focal point for paranormal investigations, and its dark history was finally brought to light. But even as we shared our findings, the sense of unease never fully left us. We knew that the malevolent force we had encountered at St. Mercy was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. "Do you think we'll ever be truly free of it?" Lisa asked one evening, her voice filled with uncertainty. "I don't know," I replied, my mind filled with the memories of that terrifying night. But we did what we had to do. We uncovered the truth, and we shared it with the world. That's all we can do. As we moved on with our lives, the experience at St. Mercy Hospital remained with us, a constant reminder of the horrors that can lurk in the shadows of history. But we took solace in the fact that we had uncovered the truth and that we had given a voice to the countless souls who had suffered and died within those decaying walls. And so, the legend of St. Mercy Hospital lived on, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lie hidden in even the most seemingly ordinary places. And as for us, we would never forget what we had found in that 200-year-old hospital and the horrors that we had left behind.